What is up, my comic comrades? Now, first and foremost, we want to acknowledge the unbelievable events happening in our country and around the world surrounding the coronavirus or COVID-19. We're not going to get into detail or dwell on it because we all know it sucks. There are incredible and unexpected challenges ahead in the coming days as we all work together to reduce the risks around the virus. We're all in this together, so we promise to be here throughout, or as long as physically possible, creating the best content we can to help you all get through it. Okay, now let's talk happy things, like comic books. It is no secret that Batman has one of the best rogues galleries in all of comics. Many, including myself, would say he has the best rogues gallery in comics and quite possibly all of fiction. And a big reason for that is because it's almost become a rite of passage for Batman writers to create the next awesome Batman villain. I mean, Scott Snyder alone, who's been writing Batman for over 6 years now, has created the Court of Owls, the Talon, Mr. Bloom, the Batman Who Laughs, and the countless other evil versions of Batman. And recently, James Tynion took over the Batman book with issue 86. And if you didn't know, Tynion was once the protege of Snyder, so you know now that Tynion's on Batman, he's gonna want to make his mark on Batman's rogues gallery. Which proved to be true because out the gate in his second issue on Batman, he starts hinting of a new villain working behind the scenes trying to take down the Dark Knight. Now it's at this point I'm gonna start getting into spoilers for issues 86 through 90, so spoilers now. Basically, we learned in issue 87 through the Riddler and the Penguin that a person known as the Designer is hiring assassins in Gotham to create confusion and to keep Batman busy for a greater plan. Over the next few issues, however, we learned that Riddler, Catwoman, the Penguin, and the Joker had made a deal with this man called the Designer many years ago, one they axed and apparently took care of. And on top of all of this, if you guys have been following the Batman book for over the last 2 years now, you know Batman and Catwoman are now an item. Catwoman's even pregnant with their kid, but that's for a whole other video, as that's going to unfold more in the Batman Catwoman book that's being written by Tom King. Anyway, in issue 89 of Batman, not only do we get our first glimpse of the Designer, but we also find out that Catwoman has been keeping her meeting with the Designer a secret from Batman. And on the last page of the issue, Batman pulls Catwoman aside and Selina tells him he's called the Designer. Years ago, I made a deal with him. We all did. Gotham's biggest bads. I'll tell you everything. But first, I just need to say, I'm sorry. This, my friends, brings us to issue 90, where we finally get the Designer's origin and see what happened in that meeting with him and several of Gotham's biggest bads from years ago. We then see Batman and Catwoman on top of a building while it's raining. Batman says, I need you to tell me everything. Catwoman replies, I know, and I'm sorry. Catwoman then starts to tell him. It started years ago, not quite at the beginning, but soon after. I found the card on my pillow. A D with a peer number, a date, and time. Curiosity, I suppose, got the better of me. Back then, danger had a different connotation. Danger meant I might get a bruise that would be hard to conceal out of my costume. Mostly it was exciting, and that D, I had heard the urban legends, the legend of a master criminal, a man who concocted the greatest crimes you've never heard of. Catwoman goes on to tell Batman, it's mostly a joke, you see. Like, you talk about stealing something ludicrous and obvious like the crown jewels in the Tower of London, and someone would say, well, he probably stole them like 20 years ago. And you knew exactly what they meant. I wasn't the only one who got a card. Now, could I just stop for a second and say how fantastic the art is in this issue? George Jimenez is a monster. Also, I'm a huge fan of the purple Catwoman Nightfall outfit. It's quite possibly one of my favorite Catwoman costumes ever, so it's cool to see it in a flashback. Anyway, back to the story. Catwoman finally makes her way to the pier where the Joker, Riddler, and Penguin also got a card. They all soon are picked up by a zombie-looking dude who says the Designer has called for you. Are you prepared to become what you must become? They say yes, and this Scooby-Doo looking motherfreaker says, then step aboard. This whole scene actually looks like something out of Scooby-Doo or the Haunted Mansion. But I love it though. The green spirits, smoke effect, and all that stuff around that house just looks so cool. Anyway, once they arrive, the Designer greets them stepping out of the house saying, hello my dear guests, I am your host for the evening. You may call me the Designer. Please hand over all of your weapons and we can begin. And once again, I have to pause because I'm digging the designs of the Designer. It's very different. I'm getting some military royalty fashion vibes in there. It's really unique. Anyway, after the Designer welcomes them, the Joker starts laughing at him, which Penguin says, show some deference, Joker. We are in the presence of a living legend. The Joker then makes a smart remark, and the Designer gets in his face, saying, the clown prince of crime, your reputation precedes you. And the Joker says, that's the whole point of a reputation, isn't it? I haven't the faintest clue who you are. And Designer replies, you will. The Designer then sits them down to have dinner and says, I thank you all for joining me tonight. I've been watching each of your careers with great fondness, and you have impressed me with your spirit and your style. But in watching, I have seen you lose time and time again. That is why I have come here to offer my expertise, and this is where we get the designer's origin, as he tells us where he came from. He goes on to tell them, in my youth, I have faced a young adversary much like your own, the finest detective the world has ever seen. In the beginning, I thought of him as a nuisance. He goes on to say, and so I needed to think bigger. I would need to design a crime, deduce the way my adversary might defeat it and how I might undefeat his defeat. From there it grew, nesting dolls, criminal plots, complicating themselves, increasing in motive and in manpower. In time, I wasn't planning crimes for personal gain. I was simply trying to beat the damn detective at his own game. But victory eluded me at every turn, and I was driven to the brink of madness and beyond, which is when a very simple truth presented itself to me and changed my life. He says I have been playing the game on the detective's terms, taking one step forward past which step he had taken to beat me. If I designed a crime with 1 degree of complexity, he would come back with 2 degrees of complexity in his means of defeating me. Beating him would require an exponential leap forward. So we spent a year in a room doing just that. The designer goes on to say, I knew to win I would need to become the man I might become after 20 years of battling him, without him evolving in kind. The man who left that room wasn't the man who entered. He was the designer. The designer then tells the gathered villains that my adversary soon fell in time, humiliated and broken. I do not believe he solved another crime in his life. Ultimately, he died the shadow of what the world remembered him to be. He then goes on to tell the villains that he's offering them a chance to evolve to their final forms, to outstrip and beat the Caped Crusader. He says the 4 of you could rule the city as an underworld united, a playground you can manipulate until you get bored. The designer goes on to say, I will give you the means to accomplish what you could not in your current states. In return, I will only take half of what you reap when you unleash your designs upon the city, and then you will never see me again. I'm just gonna say, Batman has some creepy villains, but the way Tynion is writing this dude kinda gives you a really uneasy feeling. The designer then brings each villain into his office one by one, designing each one of them their plans based on each of their skills to get what they ultimately want. For Catwoman, it was a heist, a plan that would allow her to steal the wealth of one of the largest companies on the planet with no middle step, just in and out. Something no one would ever see coming and something no one would be able to stop her from doing. For the Penguin, it was a shell game of assassins that would end with him in the mayor's office, which is what has been happening in the previous issues of this arc. But I'll get back to that in a little bit. For the Riddler, it was a technological labyrinth that would cripple the law enforcement in the city. But when the Joker went in, he was literally in there for hours and hours. As Catwoman said, imagine being the first one to understand what that monster was going to become. Because you have to remember, the Joker is not like Batman's other villains. He is evil incarnate, with the most twisted sense of humor you could ever think of. So when the designer realizes that evolving the Joker would just make him into something apocalyptic and unstoppable, he comes out with the sword in hand saying, kill them all. The Joker showed me what kind of city this is. I saw what it's going to become in time. So as the designer is attacking them along with his goons, the Joker just pulls out a gun and shoots the designer in the back of the head. Because of course he didn't give up all his weapons when he first entered his house. When the Penguin asks the Joker what he did, he replies, I told him a joke. He didn't think it was very funny. Then he tried to kill us. I just saved your life, Ozzy. But now with the designer dead, the designs he made for each of them won't work without his financial backing. So they decided to burn his house down and leave like that night never happened. We finally cut back to present where Catwoman tells Batman, you know the plan he made for me, where it involves stealing the wealth of one of the largest companies on the planet? Yeah, that would be your family's money, Bruce. Wayne Enterprises. And now, since the designer is still apparently alive somehow, he's about to use that plan to steal Bruce's wealth. It actually seems like the designer is systematically using all 4 of their plans, as in previous issues he was already using the Penguin's design that he made for him with the assassins. So he's systematically using the designs he made for them to destroy the villains and take Gotham City down. And that, my friends, is the origin of the designer. So far, I think he's a really cool villain with a dope origin. The fact that he was able to evolve himself to outthink anyone is insane. It's almost like the anti-Batman. He has a contingency for everything. Every thought, action, or move you could possibly make. In a lot of ways, it's almost like Batman's Moriarty, an evil genius. And I know that term gets thrown around a lot in fiction, but the designer seems to be like a true classic evil genius. In any case, I've been loving Tynion's run on Batman, and I'm curious to see where the story is going to go from here and what's going to happen next when Batman finally comes face to face with the designer. Also, a character that's been getting even more buzz than the designer, even though we've only seen glimpses of her up until this point, is Punchline. Joker's new lady, so to speak. As Tynion said himself, she's Joker's new lieutenant of sorts. comics, and kind of like the anti-Harley Quinn, it seems. But again, at the time of shooting this video, she's only appeared in 2 panels of Batman issue 89, and then a few more panels in Hell Arisen issue 3. But once her origins are revealed, we'll definitely get right on that and give you guys her backstory. You guys know I love me some Harley Quinn, so I'm very intrigued with this new anti-Harley Quinn, as I like to call her, even though we really know nothing about her yet. But what do you guys think of the designer? Do you think he's a cool addition to Batman's Rogues Gallery, or could you care less? Type away in the comment section down below. And that, my friends, is going to bring another episode of Variant to a close. But if you enjoyed today's Batman themed video, be sure to check out this one right here. And if you like our channel, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. It helps us out. But I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things comics.